Hi students, it's Mrs. T. Just adjusting the camera there just a little bit. Sorry about these reflections on the board. Hopefully they're not too bad and you can see the little bit of stuff that I've got up here. So today's short lecture is for week 5 and we're going to talk about social structure. Now the very first couple of pages of chapter 4, I still say pages because I don't use the online version of the book. I don't know what the term is for the online version of the book, but the first few pages in the actual physical copy of chapter 4 covers social structure. And I know we've been using that term regularly in our discussions together, the word social structure. You should by now know that when we say social structure, we're talking about a framework that covers all of us in society, covers everything from macro scale to micro scale, as I have on the board here. But social institutions, which is what the most recent lecture was all about, social institutions is just one of the 3 parts that make up what we call this complex framework of society called social structure. So all those social institutions that we mentioned in the previous lecture with the etc. at the end, remember, because that was not a comprehensive list, those are the macro scale parts of the framework that really make a matrix, so to speak, or a maze, so to speak, where norms are created because of the expectations in society associated with social institutions. Social facts are established. All of these terms from way back in week 1 and week 2 when we were learning just our basic concepts of sociology, macro scale, social facts, norms, our sociological imaginations that you're supposed to be trying to develop right now, the ability to see the connection between the macro and the micro elements of society. Hopefully you're really starting to see some of that occur. And this particular unit, which technically when we get to chapter 4, I typically refer to it as a unit 2. So we're transitioning from unit 1 to unit 2. Social structure is what the first half of chapter 4 is all about. So we've already gone over what social institutions are. So in your notes, when you are talking about social structure, not only do you need to know that it's a complex framework, but if I ask you deeper questions about it, you're going to have to give me specific answers to some details about social institutions and how those details about social institutions connect to these other 2 components. Now, I am a terrible artist, my apologies, but these circles that are overlapping here, I tried to make them intentionally overlap because these are the 3 things that are part of the complex framework. However, they are not in separate boxes on a shelf that don't touch. These things are interwoven and entwined with each other. You might remember back with functionalism, that theoretical perspective that looks at the macro scale and looks how social institutions work together like the human body. They used that metaphor, and in some of your project 1, I remember a student talked about how a house is built on a foundation with walls that hold up the roof or the second story. That's another really good metaphor for functionalism, because they say that all of these social institutions are connected to each other and are used to make up this framework that keeps society stable and orderly moving forward. But there's more to society than merely macro level. And therefore, we need to look at the other components of social structure, statuses and roles, and also social groups. And that's what chapter 4 and chapter 5 allow us to do. So this is just a very short introduction to what our next couple of lectures are going to be about. We're going to look at statuses and roles, and we're also going to look at social groups. And then this information is you're going to need good notes on this information, because project 2 that you will be doing before the end of week 7, project 2 is going to be evaluating something that I'll point you toward, and looking for the connections between macro scale social institutions and the individual that you're going to be reading about, and the social groups they were involved in, the statuses and roles that came from those social groups, the norms that came from the social institutions that affected statuses and roles. It's complicated, y'all. So macro scale to micro scale, social structure runs the gamut of the entire scope of sociology. And we're going to put it in these 3 categories, but please make sure you are very clear with your notes. These 3 categories touch, they overlap, they are braided together, they are just all kinds of twisted up and pretzel-like with each other. Okay, so none of them exist in a little bubble all by themselves. Okay, so in our next lecture, we're going to be looking at statuses and roles and get the definitions of that. And there might be so much information that I need to tell you that we might end week 5 with this information before we go in, and we might save this for week 6 just because it's kind of a lot to try to shove at you in week 5, since you've already got a couple videos in front of this one that you were required to watch. So I will see you again in our next lecture when we will talk about statuses and roles and their connection with social institutions. Bye for now.